everyone, this is Transformers Fanclub 328 here, and is it stretching to celebrate Halloween with a spiritual successor to Darkstalkers, even if it has nothing to do with the Halloween season? Played few fighting games more polished than Skullgirls, or Skullgirls Encore, or Skullgirls Second Encore. Point is, Skullgirls is awesome! The gorgeous visuals, the excellent voice cast, the precise controls, the joy-loaded gameplay, the spectacular soundtrack, the absurd amounts of references to other awesome media, and, most impressively of all, a deeply intricate story with engaging and memorable characters all make this game a prime example of my motto, it's not about what you do differently, it's about what you do well. The characters are any good fighting game's greatest strength, and everyone at Lab Zero Games made sure that this game is no exception to that rule. So I'm counting down my personal favorites. The only stipulation is that they have to be playable, as judging the NPCs with the playable roster feels unfair. Sorry, Marie. Also keep in mind that I'm not a fighting game expert, so while I'm judging their gameplay capabilities by how I handled them, and it will factor into their ranks on the list, I'm mainly interested in their writing. Let's get this show on the road with my top 14 Skullgirls characters. Keep in mind that I don't hate anyone in the playable roster. I just find some better than others, and by comparison to the rest of the roster, I don't care that much for Parasoul. Her story isn't half bad, with plenty of strong drama relating to keeping Umbrella happy and safe, and her ending is rather heartrending. Her position mostly has to do with a personal issue I have across the entire genre. Charge characters, like Guile and M. Bison from Street Fighter. I never enjoyed having to hold a direction for a few seconds, then flicking it in the opposite direction to perform special moves. It seemed very counterintuitive to the faster nature of most fighting games, and Parasoul isn't much better, as she has 3 different charge attacks. She does have a quarter circle back napalm attack, so I guess that helps. And quarter circle blockbusters are unanimous across the entire roster, not to mention her usable standard moves. But I don't find myself playing as her very often. She has a lot of great versatility on the battlefield if you put the time into it, but the game has 13 other characters to grab my attention instead. Maybe that's why she's so salty.
Wretched little twerp!
Thank you, I really needed that.
Scrub!
I usually don't mind base protagonists in a fighting game. You know, Ryu, Liu Kang, Ragna, those guys. Thing is, they just tend to be overshadowed by the awesomeness of the rest of their roster. And for me, Filia's no different. Again, her story is a solid one, trying to get the Skull Heart to find her lost memories, but then giving that up for Painwheel's sake, even if it means turning into the Skullgirl, albeit slowly. Much more bittersweet than the last one, but still pretty damn tragic. Fitting way to set up the tone of the other stories, as hers is likely the first one most people try out. Mostly because, as the sort of poster girl of the game, she has the simplest to work with moveset. She lacks a projectile, but her rushdown focus makes up for that, as most of her specials and blockbusters complement that style well. In short, she's a little basic for my taste, but she's still a solid character from both a gameplay and a story perspective. Then again, no one at her school questions the face in her hair? Did her classmates just accept that they have a Mawile in their classes? Noir is a genre I rarely dabble in, but I find myself invested in it every single time I do. So a one-man band version of RoboCop should be a winning formula for me, right? Story-wise, yes. Gameplay-wise, not as much. As the first male character in a formerly all-female fighter, never heard of a sausage to break the Clamfest before. His backstory is basically that of RoboCop's. Just replace OCP with Anti-Skullgirl Lab 8, which changes a lot more than that comparison leads on. I did really enjoy his compassion towards Painwheel and his almost father-like care for Peacock. Heck, he even acknowledges that there ain't no happy endings in this game. Although his isn't too bad compared to certain others. From a gameplay perspective, he's just not my cup of tea in a game like this. Not that I hate playing as him, in fact I love his blockbusters, and his mechanics are very unique and inspired, but his attacks just don't click with me and his large frame makes receiving damage a little too easy in my experiences. But hey, as long as he can do those rapid fire fisticuffs, I'm satisfied. Good news! The game recognizes when you're trying to do a 360 motion, so those moves are now more reliable. Bad news. Only Cerebella's ultimate showstopper blockbuster requires 360 motion. Well, not counting a DLC character she's a big fan of. She may be a very loyal Mafia hit girl, but that mostly has to do with her admiration for her father figure / possible love interest Vitelli. And she's not selfish, ignoring the wish-granting power of the Skullheart to focus on her mission, nor is she heartless, subtly showing regret over crushing Ms. Fortune into a new life gem for the Medicis. Even Marie notes this. She's the signature grappler of the game, with all sorts of hard-hitting punches and flashy command throws, as well as a few badass blockbusters, one of which can even be cancelled into bullhorns. Her damage output made her one of my most effective characters, but I'm not too good with implementing throws into my gameplay, and I had to give the other characters a try. Though I think she rocks Harley Quinn's colors a little too well.
Have you come to give confession?
Yes, I've come to confess. That you're one ugly motherfucker.
I gladly accept your tithe.
In blood.
Shit! In carrying out the will of the Trinity, she has caused a good chunk of torment for many of the characters, and her story is basically a base roster all-star mode in a similar vein to Fukua's story, except for teasing us about a true story that will never happen at the very end. Talk about frustrating. In-game, she's a compilation of various animations that didn't get used with the other characters, and she surprisingly makes those moves work together really well. So much so that one of the base game's achievements was to repeatedly use a combo featuring the other members of the base roster. That's how I got a handle on how to use her. That and the Hornet Bomber assist being half the reason I ever beat Nightmare Marie. Her blockbusters are interesting to say the least, some more effective than others. And you know what? I'd pay to have an election between her and Senator Armstrong.
A vote for me is a vote for freedom!
Let's face it, that sounds a lot more interesting than the actual upcoming election.
Second Amendment!
Fukua is this low for one reason. She's not a character. She's a joke. Nothing but a living jab at DiCapri's overblown hype cobbled together from alpha versions of Filia that evolved into Cerebella and Peacock. Well, she's actually a creation of brain drains that has ambitions to replace and thus become Filia, but her entire purpose is a quick rehash of early ideas to playfully poke fun at another company's questionable promotion tactics. This is even reflected in the various palettes she has, with most of them reflecting other copy characters like Shadow, Falco, Akuma, even DiCapri herself. Her gameplay is what saves her, however. She's a zoner and a grappler that can work surprisingly well as a rushdown character like her base. Her attacks are fast, her blockbusters complement her combos well, her damage output is very strong, and she's the main half of the reason I ever beat Nightmare Marie at all. Seriously, I think she might be a better starter character than even Filia, which works out since she's the only DLC character that's always free, since she's added via patching as opposed to an individual download. Much like Rory in Smash Bros., she's just my go-to girl. If she had a more standout story mode, she might have been higher, possibly even topping the list, but I'm fine with the Wii U All-Star mode of a story she has. While very few things in Skullgirls' story are positive, Painwheel's tale may be the darkest and saddest out of all of them. She was once a normal girl that was stolen from her life and forcibly transformed into a monstrous freak of nature in one of many attempts to create a weapon powerful enough to destroy a Skullgirl. Even when she managed to break free of her control, her conditions never became easier to manage. And her ending? Damn, that hurts! This makes every moment in the other stories where she's shown any form of compassion all the more satisfying. As a fighter, she uses her parasites and contorts her body in freakish and unnatural ways to pull off strong and efficient moves. Her projectiles have super armor, she can fly, for what little good that does, and her blockbusters are harsh, violent, and surprisingly satisfying to land. Needless to say, her moves are creepy to watch and even listen to. Good thing you can give her a Valley Girl voice to distract from that.
So this stylist right now is like super good.
This character's propensity for bad puns is almost as painful as Schumacher's Mr. Freeze. The difference is that she makes them charming. Or at the very least, it's painful to more than one person. Sometimes to herself, even.
Damn it, your name's already a pun.
She's the girl that stole the Medici's life gem, which has become a part of her, hence why she can dismember herself with no audible harm. Blood jets are freaky though. Nadia's goal is to see if the Skullheart can bring back her lost family, the Fishbone Gang. But when she does get it, she realizes that she already has a family waiting back at Little Innsmouth, and sees through the Skullheart's bullshit. While the story does end on a cliffhanger of Minette getting kidnapped by the Medici Mafia, Miss Fortune's story is one of the few bright spots on an otherwise dark and merciless series of plots. There's an optimism and loving passion to Miss Fortune's character that makes her very endearing and likable. Gameplay-wise, she drives a rushdown style similar to Wolverine, down to copying Berserker Barrage for one of her blockbusters, but her main gimmick involves detaching her head and using it in many creative ways, from simple bashing to nibbling her opponents. Her other blockbusters are interesting, but not as satisfying or as frequently used as Cat Scratch Fever, which changes as she has her head off. You'll notice that I tend to gravitate towards rushdown characters because they seem to suit my style best, but I have tried the rest of the roster and found some surprising results. Now what color palette joke can I make about— oh, that's just cruel! What you gonna do when Wolfomania runs wild on you? I'll tell ya.
I'll load this bitch up with the rocket fuel! Load it with the worst!
When I heard this guy won the second slot at the Indiegogo voter ballot, I was surprised. A wrestler inspired by one of the only stories I actually liked reading in school certainly sounded interesting, but it would be a while before I actually got to play as him, and he certainly impressed. His backstory manages to hilariously blend wrestling with the actual epic to surprisingly effective results. However, instead of fighting a dragon at an old age like in the literature, he instead gets back into the ring to help motivate the citizens of New Meridian, only to eventually discover that his big win against Grendel was rigged, and that his manager was double the whole time. He doesn't let that ruin him at all, so, with the help of his former co-star Annie, he pulls through, defeats the Skullgirl, and even gains the respect of Annie, Grendel, who is alive through the arm because voodoo, Skullgirl, witch doctor stuff, and the rest of New Meridian. Much like Miss Fortune, there's a certain optimism and even humbleness about him that makes him very likable, charming, and endearing, even if his story isn't as significant as, say, Eliza's or Squigly's. Annie said it best.
You're kind of an idiot, but not a bad guy.
In gameplay, he makes interesting uses of wrestling moves. His signature chair, the hurting, Grendel's arm, some John Talbot moves here and there, and even the crowd. This gives him great mobility and a lot of options for flashy and efficient combos. I also love his blockbusters, particularly his 3-Wolf Moonsault and his Wolfomania, the latter of which even calls in a referee to call the match like actual wrestling.
Right on. You lost me.
To stand out in a roster this varied is quite an accomplishment. As a war orphan, she managed to handle being mutilated into a living weapon surprisingly well, by having her entire arsenal reflect the old Golden Age cartoons she used to love, with many of her antics being stuff you'd see out of a classic Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry episode. She also manages to have the most standout story of the base roster by having a personal connection with Marie, giving her a lot more character than just that one cheap boss. Why aren't you playable, Marie? Sorry, getting off track. Despite her clear insanity, Peacock herself is not without some humanity, obviously distraught by Dr. Avian's passing and willing to carry out Marie's wish for her sake. That, combined with a welcome bit of snark here and there, provide another surprising hope spot amongst the darkness. Unlike most characters in the roster, she's got a major focus on keep away, with many types of projectiles and ranged blockbusters to help with that. Her level 3 blockbuster has to be my favorite, but it's a real pain to pull off. But really, even with Dio's Steamroller among the items she can drop, with how many games can you say that you won by dropping an elephant? I like your burgers, but damn, that's as scary as anything this game throws at you. No! You know, when I first saw images of her and read the little story we knew about her at the time, I thought she was just an innocent victim caught up in the whole Medici business. And honestly, I'm happy I couldn't have been more wrong. In many ways, this is the largest and cruelest story yet, showing Eliza as not just a well-loved singer with an insatiable hunger for her charity blood that forced her into the Medici Mafia, but as the greatest evil of the Skullgirls universe's past and present, a threat much greater than the Skullheart, whose purpose began to come into question once she reached the Skullgirl lair. It even established Double's insides as a sanity-stealing stage and showed the villain winning! That's nothing new, but damn this hurt! If only that teaser at the end got some kind of follow-up. Yeah, well, at least she manages to rock an entire Marvel vs. Capcom team in a single character, summoning her bodyguards, morphing her blood body into unique forms, and even using Sekhmet to absolutely maul her enemies to shreds. Those blockbusters are surprisingly satisfying to pull off, especially at the end of a good combo or as a way to finish off your opponent. And she has colors based on Mailefu, Ragyo, and Dio all in one character. How could I go wrong with that? There are certain aspects about this character that can't be entirely ignored. But luckily, there are other components to talk about, so let's discuss Nurse February 14th. The base Skullgirls game back when it was first released locked hers and Double's story modes until you beat everyone else's stories first, where she appears as little more than one of Marie's mini-bosses alongside Double, who she was rarely fought without. That made her story more interesting, as we see that she is the last member of a holiday-themed group called The Last Hope, and is essentially forced to be one of the Skullgirls' minions. Throughout the battle, she shows a sense of humanity and regret for her actions that we see so little of in her other appearances in any of the other stories, including the DLC chapters. Her ending even has her skip the Skullheart's bullshit and directly become the Skullgirl so Painwheel's purpose and revengeance can be fulfilled. Her fast-paced combos and efficient damage output with her medical equipment made her my first main in the game. Not to mention, her blockbusters are effective, complimentary, and even impressive at times.
Tell me where it hurts.
Jesus!
Oh, and she leaves a match like she's from Mortal Kombat or something. Seriously, those 4 rib cages. And here's the character that motivated me to make this list in the first place. It's surprisingly rare for a character to win me over so quickly, but Robo-Fortune sold me on her character mere seconds after I started up her story. The silly references, the overall ridiculous tone, and even the brief moment where she questions her morality that gets thrown to the side with a bit of lampshading all made this story the laugh-out-loud comedy of the year. As a fighter, she's rocking projectiles of all kinds, floating head attacks, plenty of combo potential, beams and magnets for blockbusters, and loads of lines and references made even funnier with Kimlin Tran's hilarious robotic delivery.
I still hate robots require maintenance, not physicals.
It's such a blast using her, and as such, she's remained a staple in my main roster, but mostly in Monsoon's colors. Any reference to her vengeance is awesome in my book.
This was a triumph.
For console gamers, it's been a hell and a half waiting for the promised Skullgirls DLC, but when we finally got the first character, they did not disappoint.
Are you ready?
For over a decade.
While the base roster stories were nothing short of impressive, this was the first time where we saw shit hit the fan. Not only was it the first story mode to not end in a battle with Marie, and the first one to have a playable tag team and a post-credit scene, it's also where we saw firsthand how far the Skullheart and the Medici Mafia will go to achieve their goals. On her mother's birthday, Double gave her mother the Skullheart and used it to show the ruthlessness of the Medicis, who promptly murdered Squigly's entire family and literally silenced her as well. Although her mother tried to save her family by wishing on the Skullheart to jackass genie results, Squigly's father gave her Leviathan as a parting gift, one which paid off as she managed to resist becoming one of Marie's mindless slaves thanks to Leviathan. Even with all the crap she's gone through, she still maintains an elegant, understanding, and lovable personality, as well as a great companionship with Leviathan. Just look at that win animation, it's so cute. This extends into her gameplay, in which she mostly has Leviathan do the damaging strikes, but the two seem very well coordinated. From their normals, to their specials, to their unique mechanics, to their blockbusters, these two have become very inseparable, and it's hard to think of one without the other. What else can I say? She's adorable, she's a great character, she's a fun fighter, she rips off one of my all-time favorite fighting game characters, and the year of build-up made this payoff even better. I'm Transformers Fanco 328, and I really need to stop doing countdowns where my number one is going to be obvious by the end of it. I guess I'll just have to remember it so you don't have to.
Just take
exorcism or something.
Very well, set phasers to crisp.